Amazing. Thank you again for everyone for joining and for tuning in, both through the Zoom call and everyone tuning in via Facebook. Just some quick accessibility notes. Closed captioning is available. If you need that, please see the CC icon on your Zoom toolbar. Also, we have our team supporting on the back end for all the folks on Facebook Live, so feel free to drop questions there as well. And we have ASL interpretation provided by Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba. So thank you to Janine and Tessa, who will be spotlighted, and you may also pin them to your screen if you need those accessibilities. My name is Belinda Owase. I'm the Artist Programs Coordinator for STEPS Public Art. We foster dynamic and inclusive communities through public art and creative placemaking, transforming urban spaces into vibrant places through cultural planning, community arts, and arts accessibility capacity building programming. Before we begin the session on CreateSpace community engagement strategies, we want to start this conversation by acknowledging the sacred land on which we operate and I'm meeting from today. It has been a site for human activity for 15,000 years. The territories include the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. The territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes, taking only what is needed and ensuring that the dish is never left empty for others. Today, the meeting place for Take Toronto is the home to a large, active, and diverse urban Indigenous community from many nations across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to use this land to share resources, ideas, and generate creativity. As a public arts organization, we recognize our privilege in working on stolen and unceded lands and are working to unlearn the colonial structures to move towards reconciliation. We also encourage everyone to learn about the lands that we call home. Nativeland.ca is a great starting point and resource to help learn about the traditional Indigenous territories that we currently reside in, as well as the treaties, communities, and languages. We have pasted a link to that in the chat, and we encourage everyone to learn about these lands that we call home and about the Indigenous communities that we share this land with today. Again, just for anyone who just joined us, thank you and welcome to Community Engagement Strategies panel discussion. Some quick Zoom housekeeping again, if you just joined. We ask that you please keep your mic muted. We will have some allotted time at the end for questions, but also feel free to just drop them in the chat as we have our discussion. But this place is a zero tolerance for any disrespect and disruptive behavior, and we will exercise our right to remove any participants who don't cooperate. We also have closed captioning available, so please see the CC icon on your Zoom toolbar for subtitle settings. And we have ASL interpreters who are spotlighted, so Janine and Tessa, and you may feel free to pin them to your screen by clicking the top right-hand corner of the interpreter's box. But yeah, thank you again and welcome to this panel discussion on community engagement strategies. My name is Belinda and I'll be moderating this talk, and I'm joined by the amazing Adriana, Chantel, and Charles-Eric, and I'm very excited about this discussion. I'm going to pass it off to Adriana to introduce herself, and then we'll just get started. So thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Adriana Alarcon. I'm an artist working from Treaty 1 territory. And I believe we're keeping this really brief, and our bios are going to be posted on the chat. So I just wanted to speak to the community outreach side of things. I don't think I have the expertise on the public art side of things, but I do have quite a lot of background knowledge on community organizing.
Chantel can go next, and then you can pass it off to Charles-Eric.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chantel Parris, and I am from North York Arts. I am the social media and community outreach coordinator, and I'm excited to talk with everyone tonight for us to get broader understandings and to share. And I'll pass it on to Charles-Eric.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Charles-Eric. I'm from responsible for development and partnerships at MAWA, which produces murals in Montreal, and pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Amazing. Thank you all. And thanks again for everyone tuning in. We're just going to get right into the discussion portion of tonight. And I'll start us off with a good question to kind of see how we define community engagement. So how do we define community engagement and outreach generally, and as it relates to public art, and just your experience as well? Anyone feel free to jump in. I'm not going to call on anyone. Unless I have
I guess
to.
I can jump in, right?
Yes, thank you.
I think it's a complex question, difficult question to answer. But personally, I think that community engagement is what gives purpose and sense to our lives, and which we all aim for stronger communities. I think we should, and it's also tough to define it very specifically, because it's also rich and it depends on the projects, depends on the context and everything, on the community specifically. And I think it also relates to all this, also the same with public art, which is community engagement can only be defined, I guess, by the sum of every community engagement experience. But what I'd say, what is what is like kind of the main, I guess, the main, not definition, but the main thing is that, all of the projects have to come from the community, have to address community needs, have to be with local partners, citizens, members who have the desire to strengthen or to change or to transform the communities. And it's not something that is imposed or from the top from the bottom, and has to come from the bottom up. So yeah, I think that's pretty much.
Great. Thanks, Charles-Eric. I think I kind of took a little bit of a different approach at answering the question. I think outreach events can be open to everyone, or they can be designed with particular demographics in mind. Usually they can focus on an existing community, or they can be the start of making a community. Every time you have a gathering of people from different communities that comes together, they come in and they form another community. Most of the time in our field of work, these events feature art making, crafting, designing, or some activity with the end goal of creating something together. In public art, these programs are the means to create something with the community input, and folks are included in the design process. And ideally, folks are included not just as a sounding board, but throughout the entire process. The aim is to create public art projects that reflect the community in which they exist, so that people will take pride in the end result and feel welcome to interact and coexist with the project. These events are sometimes they're part research, part creation, part social gathering. Planning a gathering that is fun, informative, instructional, inclusive would deliver, the other two goals of the research and the creation aspects. Creation is the what, I would say. Creation is what will the participants be doing during the event? Are they sketching on large sheets of paper, or individually or together? Are they answering questions? Are they making with 3D materials? Are they making something to take home? Are their ideas being recorded somehow? Like somehow you're getting all that input towards the final project. The social gathering planning would be the how. How to plan a really fun event that is accessible and engaging. Is there time to free think? Are there quality materials? Are there fun prompts and examples? Are there various methods of learning and creating? Are there ways of generating ideas through discussion, through exploration, through making, through responding? And I would say that the research part would be the why, and it's about collecting the input and organizing all the different ideas that come into one cohesive project. Sometimes this is about actively including people in the creation of projects which will exist in their own community, and it's about ensuring that the final art reflects the values, identities, and aspirations of the community where it will live.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with both that it is quite a dense question. And also, yeah, the participation of folks is definitely something that's very key to showing like it's a case by case basis, but ensuring that their participation is active. Thank you, Chantel. Is there anything you wanted to add before I go on to the next question?
Yes, thank you so much, Charles-Eric and Adriana. But I would just like to add in my lens briefly that this to me is built on fostering relationships, community engagement. So you need to understand your community to engage them, so creating relationships that allow you to understand what the community actually needs. To me, that is community engagement, and building backwards from that, as well as, again, yes, having programming and all of these things that also encompass community engagement, but it all to me starts from fostering relationships. So rather, if that's like outreach moments where you're at, different events with a booth, or if you have smaller art activations where you are able to gain metrics and insights as to what people are interested in. But yeah, I'll leave it there, but yes.
No, great, very great points. Thank you. I think this next question definitely will give us an idea as well, as you kind of pointed to various experiences for all of your different works. So if you could share a story of community engagement that sticks out to you, and how this helped you to like humanize art in the community, and how you operate in your work, and why this is such a crucial component of your work.
I think I can start this time. I won't make Charles-Eric start every time. I was thinking about this, and one example from my recent experience in organizing community events would be the Repair-a-thon event that we held at MAWA. And this was an outreach event that, although it wasn't like a public art related project, it was more of a hands-on direct making project. It was quite successful in gathering to mark International Women's Day. And what we did is we hired 3 different facilitators from different communities with different strengths in the sewing and mending skill set. And we provided a ton of really good materials for people to bring their own clothing items to repair or mend, and to mindfully sit and think about continued consumption, and how we are trying to not discard everything right away and be a little bit more conscientious of the environment. We brought lots of snacks, And leading up to the event, we asked in our advertising what kinds of projects people would be looking to take on so that we were informed about what their goals would be. And it gathered excitement about the event. It made people be thoughtful about what their intentions were when they came to the event. They responded, and that made it possible for us to have the right materials on hand. I bring up this event. I know it's not like it's a different kind of event. People from various backgrounds came together for an afternoon. They filled the space with conversation and enjoyment. They completed their projects. They proudly showed them off to the group. They learned a stitch or required for an invisible mend, or they made really obvious patches and designs to accentuate the clothing instead of invisible repairs. There was even an interlude of song where a new participant began singing to the crowd as they sat in their station in a contemplative state. The event has had people asking us, when are you doing this again? When are we all gathering again? And I think that's a real benchmark of a successful event is if people want it to come back. So hopefully we'll be doing that on an annual basis.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, I definitely agree if the community is very responsive to the work and wants it to keep happening. That's a good sign. So that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing.
I'm happy to go next. Recently at North York Arts, we hosted a 2-day festival called Inspire North. And during this festival, we had an array of artistic expression. We had tours for dance, we had Ofera doing kite making, we had a drag show, we had a live art installation, marching band, a little something for everybody. But this was located at the Orchard Pavilion at Downsview. So a space that is not normally activated on a regular basis for community, and bringing life to that space. It was amazing to watch people build relationship with the space, people that were just on regular walks, maybe with the dog or neighboring family members, was able to stop by and see activation and life within the space and feel connectivity, and humanness within the surroundings, and also see identity. So that to me was like a beautiful experience. And that's, what encourages and also brings that community engagement element alive.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll cheat a little bit because I'll share a couple of stories, not only one, because I feel that yeah, I guess what's the most profound, or I guess what defines community engagement is really the sum of the stories, because every public art project has a story, and even every person that engages has a story also. So I mean, it's tough to to pinpoint one story, because MU has produced more than 200 murals in Montreal, and every mural has to have a sense and a purpose, and that sense and purpose is always defined by in which community it is and how the community engages throughout the project. So I guess a couple maybe interesting stories to share is that we unveiled a mural actually today in Montreal, and so we have a partnership who's been going with the Office Municipal d'Habitation de Montréal, which I guess manages the social housing in Montreal, and we have done murals with in collaboration with residents that live in the social housing projects for 15 years. So so I guess it's a nice story to tell, because those people that live in those social housing projects are isolated. socially, you know, have few connections throughout society, are discriminated, have less access to arts and culture in general. So participating in a public art project, you know, gives them, I guess, a sense of pride and kind of to express themselves. And so, you know, we had actually residents speaking today at the unveiling how they were proud to live where they lived, and how, you know, participating in that project and collaborating and giving ideas, and how it actually transformed their life and transformed their where they live. So I guess that's one of the stories, you know, meeting with the artist. And another story would be actually, it's nice to create stories where otherwise there wouldn't be some. So I mean, we actually work with businesses, and like Hydro-Québec, and we actually produce a couple of murals with Hydro-Québec, and we had one specifically where we organized days of painting the mural, where employees from Hydro-Québec would paint with residents, with people from the community. So it's stories that wouldn't be able to be told without that specific project. So it's nice to, you know, create something that out of nothing, I guess. And actually to know that businesses can also participate in engaging communities. It's not only something that's in the community. I mean, we can actually create something. And I think a really nice story is that MU has actually, our offices are situated in Habitation Jeanne Mance, which is actually a social housing project. So for 15 years, we've been doing projects with the youth, with the residents, and it's tough to, you know, I guess, measure community engagement with one project. You need to be there throughout the years, and being there for 12, 13 years, we really see the impact of how not only one project, but many projects can actually have an impact for the residents, but also, you know, having urbanization and parks, and we really see like the long-term impacts of that engagement throughout the community.
Thank you so much for all of that. Yeah, I think to your point about the longevity of it as well, I think is a really good thing to point out, because the impact sometimes can not be showcased or not as apparent, just project by project. And for bringing up accessibility, because it leads really well into our next question. I think also to the point of every person has their own story and their participation in each project, or as it relates to community, that can differ. So what factors do you consider to make the work more accessible and to take into consideration different accessibility needs to the community, and yeah, and clearly outline like their contributions and how they will be contributing to the work that you do? I hope that made sense. Feel free to jump in.
I think that we had a series of questions around accessibility and how to address the needs of the community, how to address sort of the hierarchy of needs before people can actually engage in art making. So in you know, sort of breaking down a little bit how the parts of the question, I think in terms of outlining their contributions, I would just begin with lots of clarity and make it really clear what the goal of the event is. What is the one thing that you hope that every participant takes away? What is the one thing that you hope to hear from every participant? In planning events, we can focus on making the event itself accessible, and there are many resources and steps and AANM on creating accessible events. But I think here we're talking about, is the work accessible? Is the outcome something that people of all backgrounds can engage with? You know, in my mind, whenever I think about public art, the picture in my head is, you know, the rainbow tunnel that is visible when driving north on the Don Valley Parkway in Toronto. And I don't know why that is the picture in my mind. Like if you say the word mural, that's the picture that I have in my mind, because the work is accessible. It's visible from very far away to as many people as possible. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of drivers on the DVP every day, and it's accessible in that it is easy to define what it is. It's a rainbow. It's very plain. It was painted on the outside wall of a tunnel. That's it. There are so many wonderful and diverse pieces of public art in our cities, but the Rainbow Tunnel wins in my mind, perhaps due to the exposure that it's had, the longevity it's had. I've seen it hundreds, if not thousands of times. It's easy to decode. It's easy to access the location. It's on a popular walking trail. And, you know, it has permanence. Like initially the artist kept repainting it over and over again until I think mural groups took over the care for it. And then in terms of addressing accessibility needs for community members, I think we have published at MAWA, we have published several videos on addressing accessibility, where I think there are many means for accessibility that have thankfully become mainstays, such as, you know, what we're doing today, providing ASL interpretation, programming at wheelchair accessible venues, using microphones even at small events so that all can hear, using large font sizes on printed resources and so on. If I may, I really wanted to talk about food. I just love talking about food and how food brings people together, and food is really a key way of making things, making events fun and accessible. It's been a benchmark of community events, but usually, you know, what it hasn't been thought of as an accessibility need that needs to be addressed. So food at free community events is usually what? Coffee and cookies, right? Coffee and cookies. You go to a meeting, coffee and cookies. But it's important to provide participants with nutritious bites that can be enjoyed by everyone with different needs. And there has to be something vegetarian, something vegan, something dairy-free, something gluten-free, something sugar-free, something spice-free. And all of those items don't have to necessarily be met by the same food item. We can't assume that the alternative food can be given to all the people that have food sensitivities, because, you know, not all vegans are gluten intolerant, or not all diabetics like dairy, and so on. You know, I'm going to pause now, but I could keep talking about this. I think it's easier to plan for what most people will eat, but if your program has a food budget, it should also have an accessible food budget, and start by purchasing the accessible food items, and then fill in with lots and lots of really good, like, fruits and veggies and items that everyone can eat. And like I said, I'm going to pause now because I could keep talking about food for quite a while.
Yeah, no worries. I also love food, but I see Charles-Eric needed, so I'll let you go.
Oh, sorry. I mean, to add to what was said, I think, you know, I'm don't want to repeat necessarily what was said, but I'd say that one thing that we, you know, unfortunately, I mean, it means working different hours, but I mean, just concerning like the hours when, if we do consultations or workshops or whatever, we always think about, you know, the time. And usually if it's working hours, I mean, obviously at 2 p.m., I mean, you won't have a lot of people that, you know, that will be there because they're working. Also, we have worked with, you know, I mean, we've been we've existed for 16 years, and we've created partnerships with local organizations and kind of, I guess, des tables de quartier. I don't know how to say that in English, but you know, kind of associations of organizations, social organizations, non-for-profits, and so on, who actually offer services to community members and depending on their needs, obviously. But we've been working with them throughout the years and passing on information to them and you know, clear information. I mean, to invite or to, I guess, to make our activities accessible to certain populations. I mean, usually some of them have kind of, I guess, a trust relationship with different organizations, not necessarily with MU. So it's pretty helpful to have partners that, you know, have access to, I guess, certain communities. And I you know, I find it difficult. I've only been at MU for a year, but what I find difficult with public art, and I guess with murals, is that you know, I mean, it's only like the tip of the iceberg, right? When you see it, it's not like the process, and obviously, like outlining contributions, it's, I guess it's the main challenge, because people, when they look at public art, they don't see really what's behind, what's the real sense and purpose. So we've I guess come up with certain solutions. So for every project, we have kind of a metal plate or something where we describe not only like the artist and so on, but the process and how community was engaged in the project, so that people afterwards, you know, I guess. And we also have guided tours of our murals. So we have artists and employees that kind of do specific visits, and we speak with the members, and we talk about the process, and, you know, we name how the community was engaged, which also helps. And obviously social media, but also we had an unveiling today, for instance, and the artist spoke about the process and how the community members, the residents, inspired them in his art. And we also had, of course, community members speaking at the unveiling, and you know, we had, I mean, there were politicians and so on, and businesses, and so it's nice that I guess the members give that opportunity to speak on their participation, so that important members of society know that. I mean, politicians, I think it's important not only to talk about the public side, or the artistic side of the project, sorry, but more of the community side of the project.
Yeah, I really love the concept of guided tours. Although public art is great for the fact that you can just happen upon it, I think it's really nice, the intentionality of tours, to let community know exactly what the intent was, especially with certain artworks being more abstract, with some of the themes and motifs that are conveyed. It's nice to kind of get an idea of how all of the work is representative of the community and takes into consideration all of those different ideas. But yeah, thank you for sharing. Chantel, anything to add?
Yes, super great points made by Adriana and Charles-Eric. Food and time frames, when are things being hosted, are major things that contribute to accessibility. And in my mind frame, how I kind of digest accessibility is the simple things such as food and time frame, as well as physical, but not limited to physical, but also the unseen kind of support that might be needed, you know, rather let's say, for instance, we was doing office hours at our office where artists was able to register, sign up, come alone or come for collective and use the space as they need. But we have stirs at our office, and that is the only way up, you know. So we had to kind of think, like, who are we isolating by having this programming at our office, and what can we do to kind of, you know, still create an accessible space for people. And also taking into regards that accessibility is not just physical things, but also we have interpreter here today, like simple things that might be overshadowed, but do play a major role in someone's engagement capabilities or understanding of what's happening in an artistic space or regular space. But yes, I just, in my world, accessibility simplified to these simple things. I feel like sometimes it can be over contextualized, but it is food, it is time, it is resources, these things that are every day. It is TTC to make it to the event, these simple things that kind of weigh, and sway decisions to attend, things that can be transformative for community members.
Absolutely. I think a keyword there definitely is transformative. I appreciate all those contributions. I think all of those aren't even necessarily simple. I think those are the big things. I think whenever I go to an event and there's free food, I'm so ecstatic. I can't imagine if I wasn't able to like eat some of those things, like how that would affect me, and being able to like commute to a certain space in order to attend the community event. Yeah, thank you. We sort of addressed this question.
I don't know how to turn this thing off.
We
Like, how do we get out of here?
wanted to also elaborate on just why community engagement is such a crucial component to the work that you do, or just speak to just the different ways that you engage with community. Yeah.
I guess it's my turn, right?
Sure.
If we follow the I'd say that it's MU's, it's MU's mission. So our mission is we produce murals, but to engage, to actually, well, to create a social transformation. So obviously, like, community engagement is what drives MU. So what drives our project, and without that, like, honestly, like, it's just decoration, right? So we don't want to be just decoration, or so. And what we see is that it's sometimes it's tough because you like, financial support is always for projects. So the goal is to produce a mural. So afterwards, like, financial support is, like, we're a charity organization. So obviously, like, we need financial support, but the mural still lives, right? But in the financial support, like, after the mural is done, well, the project is done. But I think what's the most important thing is the life of the project afterwards. So I think actually it's weird because what's important to our work is what happens afterwards, but because we've seen that, for instance, that was Habitation Jeanne-Mance, and for a lot of our projects, is that a public art, when done by engaging community members, is what drives change, or what creates other types of change and social transformation. For instance, like, trash can be, there's less trash, or people feel more secure because there's public art, and we integrate lighting and the equation, and there's parks and so on, and so it's the start for something more. So I think it sums it up, but I think it's really the most important thing.
Yes, I definitely hear your point about how once the project is done, the funding is over, right? And the livelihood of the project and the continued engagement should be just as much a priority as the materials and the time to make the project. I think I kind of took on this question in a little bit of a theoretical approach. Like, I think, of course, art that is reflective of the community is art that makes an impact. And people like to see themselves represented in the media that surrounds them. And this is true of all the art forms, right? Films, printed ads, theater, like everything. Public art projects are not only intended to beautify their neighborhood, they're not just decoration. They're also expected to reflect the issues, histories, and interests of the people in that community. And I was thinking about an example in Winnipeg. New public artworks have been part of the development along the new transit corridor. And at Beaumont Station, there's a large copper kettle that sits to commemorate the legacy of Roostertown, the Métis community that existed in this particular urban area, what is now an urban area. The art is accessible in that the kettle is easily recognizable as a Métis symbol. But why is it a kettle? Why people can read the didactic or research on their own. Why the artist chose this iconic style of kettle? What is the connection to this geographical location? What happened here? Are there still Métis people living in this as a community here? Why not? These are questions that hopefully arise when people encounter the project. Public art should be a way to learn about the history of a city or a neighborhood. I think about Cabbage Town, how there are so many beautiful murals of cabbages. And when I moved to that area many years ago, I didn't know, what I wondered why this area was known as Cabbage Town and why there was all this iconography. As I walked my dog, I noticed that on the lawns, there was fancy homes with fancy cabbages on the lawn. So it was a food for thought for me and a point of inquiry. I learned that at first it was sort of an epithet that came from the distinctive smell of boiling cabbage. That was the main food staple. And another research told me that it was, sort of a way to look down on Irish settlers who grew cabbages and other vegetables on their front lawns as a way to feed themselves. So the beautiful murals were easily accessible to me then, but they also stirred questions, and they had me coming up with like a myriad of answers. So I think that's kind of a success story for some of these murals. Is they are representative of the community in which they're situated. Multiple interpretations, a variety of access points would ensure that more people see themselves represented in their work.
Yeah, I don't know if you meant to make a pun with like the food for thought and like Cabbage Town, but I caught that and also appreciate the reference because that's the neighborhood I got familiar with too, because that's where I stay and some of my family in Toronto. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think it should have some information about the community and the history behind it. And I think plaques are a good way to also do that. If someone just happens upon a mural or something, that there's something that they can reference to learn more and uncover more of the story behind it. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Chantel.
Much to add, because great points have been made and it kind of plays into my thought frame. But basically, yes, funding is necessary for community engagement. And as Charles-Eric mentioned, if there's no community engagement or no programming or no activations, then we are just decoration. But essentially, like, when we do have funding and when we are activating spaces through murals and programming and different activities, the interaction lives on past the funding or past the actual dates that the mural was put up or the kite making was held. Let's say from Inspire North, we did kite making as mentioned. A child takes that home, and then on next Sunday they're playing with it still. It's the program is done and it's gone, but that memory and that connection and that moment within community creating still lives on. And then it's simultaneously shared with others that see the kite flying and that enjoy that moment. Or as you all mentioned, especially Adriana with the cabbages, you know, walking by and getting that education and that understanding of the true connection within this neighborhood and the depth that it holds and the beauty that it holds. So yeah, everything lives on. And I think that's the beautiful thing about community engagement and resources from it. It might be for shorter periods of time, but the legacy and the memories of it continue to still enrich the communities.
Yes, absolutely. And to that point of enrichment, the next question I wanted to ask is about how community, when they participate, how you manage expectations when engaging community and with community members. And I think that also could speak to ensuring that it is enriched, but also just the various methods that people could contribute. I think that also, again, relate to accessibility needs and just the different ways that people may be able to contribute. But yeah, which ways do you manage expectations and what has worked and how do you move throughout this process?
I think it's my turn. You know, I was talking about the why, the research methods that ensure that the project reflects values, identities, and aspirations of the community. And these methodologies vary quite a lot, and the results vary even more. But how do you combine all of the ideas that are generated? You know, is it good enough to simply collage everything together? Is that the ultimate use of your artistic vision? It's important to collect input and responses in an ethical way that ensures representation is achieved, but also while the project remains cohesive and meaningful. From all of the ideas and broad responses, it's important to move into dialogue so that similar ideas can be compiled together and different ideas can be weighed against each other. Those with similar interests can focus on how to represent their ideas in a unified way, and outliers could be given their own space so that they feel included. And ultimately, the artist makes the choice in how to include input and participation by interacting openly with participants. If you see that someone is very skilled at making drawings of words that are mentioned by others, this is a skill to utilize in the design process. If someone is happy shading and mark making without focusing on shape, then this is someone who will most likely be happy to cover large areas with, you know, with whatever color or method you suggest. If someone is asking lots of questions, but their page is mostly empty, they need to be paired with someone who knows more about the project, maybe. The aim is to leverage the skills that you see in the participants and find ways to record their voices. When bringing everything together, you know, you end up collecting likes with likes and see if there's some theme that is being voiced over and over again. Are people saying the same thing but in different ways? Maybe. Great. Capture that and make that variable language part of your description of the project. Did someone say something that resonated with everyone? Ask them why it did. And that way you can hear more from people while focusing the dialogue along commonly shared ideas. And, you know, centering their voices in the project, but also maintaining some of your own artistic visions. You know, it's a balancing act, I think. Charles-Eric maybe has more experience with this. That's all I have to say.
I guess I'd say that I think the first thing, important thing is that to know beforehand the way you're going to engage with the community, because you know, we've done 200 murals and I guess we also had 200, I guess, community engagement stories and strategies and for instance, so we have projects with social housing residents, and So we had meetings with the artists and the residents, told stories and anecdotes and ideas, and it inspired the artist in his creation. And we had another unveiling like 2 weeks ago, partnering with the shelter for homeless women, Chez-Doris. And the women from Chez-Doris actually participated in the creation of a garden where it was kind of a small street, and so you know, that's a different story, right? That's a different strategy, because it depends on the partners and the situation, the context, the community. And we also sometimes have really traditional public consultations with, for example, at Tétroville. So it's really, I think the important thing is to know beforehand, like the way or the strategy you have to be clear, right? And you can't really change during the process. So it's also important to be clear with the people, like what to really say the things like they are. And for instance, like we had a lot of stories with public art, like you know, a lot of people, they want really to participate, and they want to, for instance, have blue there and certain shapes and forms, but it's always something that we have to say and to repeat and so on, that you know, the public art creation will not necessarily answer to their needs, right? I mean, it's the artist's creation. It's not so I mean, the community is engaged, but it still is something, you know, from an artist. Because before when MU was created, we had a first project in 2007, and actually a mural is considered a construction site. So I mean, people or youth can just participate in the project because it's considered a construction site. So that's kind of a really big challenge, right? Because people can't participate directly in the creation of the mural. So, and actually we found that really need to be clear in the steps, and we have sometimes have partners that want to do consultation at every step of the process, like vote and so on. But we found that people sometimes get tired, and people like leave, they change. So we have a certain person, but not afterwards it's a different person. So when there's too much discussion, like people get just tired and they just leave. So I mean, you kind of lose their engagement, right? Because when it's there, you need to benefit from it, but it can't really last too long, otherwise you just leave. So yeah.
Yeah, those are both really great points about the artistic freedom of the artist as well, to encapsulate that, but also like the various methods of ensuring that you're like clear and outlining all of those expectations with audience. I think definitely helps in like retaining some of that engagement if they are aware that there's going to be 2 consultations as opposed to like 5. That will probably definitely be something that's valuable to know. But yeah, thank you for those points. Chantel, do you have anything to add before I move on?
Yes, I can speak to what Charles-Eric mentioned about consultations and kind of setting those boundaries and expectations. We actually had a mural kind of grant program called With Love North York, where we put murals in 6 community centers. But before we put them up, we wanted to set expectations and kind of boundaries, not boundaries, but yeah, expectations of what these murals could look like. And also how it can reflect them still with the capacity of the artist, while also respecting like the creative eye and lens. And I found that made such a difference. And once the murals was up, the community felt that much more connected to it because there was a part of that process and there's healthy expectations were set. And that was a beautiful process. And I can also speak to it in terms of the festival realm. We had, we was advertising festival, whoop, whoop. And some of our creatives within our community, artists, wanted to sell and be vendors at these events. But as a team, we already knew our capacity, and our kind of focus was engagement more in activations, and not that artisan realm. So setting that boundary of, unfortunately, this time around, we're focused on kind of the lighter aspects or funner aspects, but maybe next year in 2024, we'll be able to accommodate selling goods, So yes, the boundary was kind of set, but also with leeway and taking as feedback, in a way that we can implement to future things. So that friction is not always a bad thing. It can help to improve as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think there has to be a negative connotation to boundaries, because I think it could definitely both safeguard the artists and the participants who are engaging with the work, just by clearly outlining what their participation is going to be, if it's more thematic or if it's going to be literal application, just so everyone's aware, and just all the different various methods that are available in that process. But yeah, thank you. Another question, which sort of is also quite general, but also speaks to how valuable we find community engagement in all of our work, is how we communicate the importance of this art to communities and why they should engage, and why it's valuable for them to engage in order for their ideas and their identities to be reflected.
I can go first.
Okay.
But yes, for myself, when I think about this question, and see, this is why I don't go first, because I like time to think and kind of digest, But personally, when it comes to, okay, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Yeah, just how we convey the importance of engaging community into the art.
Yeah, I got you now. Think for a minute, I got you now. But okay, so personally, I also do the social media side of our community outreach. And I think it goes beyond the actual activation and what's happening in that space, because of course the participants and everyone involved has the knowledge, but you do need to still share what's happening and the depth and the purpose behind it. So sharing that knowledge through newsletters, through social media posts, through community boards. Hey, we have this art installation up. It represents X, Y, and Z, and this is what you can take away from it. It makes a huge difference. So in my eyes, not leaving it just up to like the isolated experience of being involved in the programming or the mural making process or whatever creative realm it is within the community, but also sharing, and sharing the purpose and insights behind what kind of drove the ideas behind it. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I can go next.
Mhm.
So I guess I see the question. Well, I mean, there are different ways to see the question, but I'd say that Mu has produced more than 200 murals, but right now, like after 16 years, like our goal is not necessarily to produce more murals. The issue is more that we get financed through mural projects. So obviously, like we need to do more projects get more funding, right? But I think more and more, like what we're trying to do is work on maybe ways to kind of enrich, or I don't know how to say it, but enrich the community engagement, or convey it further. For instance, by doing more guided tours, or we have like it's in French balado, where people can listen listen to kind of listen to stories, which I think conveys more community engagement than just the mural, right? But I mean, there's still the issue of the finance, where we need to obviously like not convince, but I guess say that to the city or to partners, or that there's more to the mural, or Mew's vision of murals is more than just the mural. It's also like social transformation and doing other stuff, or doing lighting, or so I guess I see the question that way, where we need to find other ways to, I guess, to convey that community engagement, and to create a deeper impact.
Thank you. Adriana, did you want to add to that? Or
I think, are we out of time?
No, you've got time.
Okay. Yeah, I thought of it really quickly. Just different communities have their own pre-established art forms and means of expression. And it's not really that we need to express the importance of art to them, but we need to reflect their creative expression in the projects and the things that we do that are about them, including them. We need to include multiple voices, so that community from each community, or in order to draw out interest and passions to the forefront, so that they can be seen by the rest of, by the rest of society. And I think a lot about how at MAWA we have a really strong, it's a very feminist mandate, and so people who have a feminist vision will gravitate towards what we do. So there's already a lens there, so we don't really have to convince them of that the things we do are going to be meaningful to them, but at the same time they hold us in sort of in a higher regard, so then we're even more accountable to make sure that their voices are included, and that our programming reflects that particular community.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think it's definitely both ways, where we want to reflect the community, but also ensuring we utilize the best ways to invite them into the work, so that they can influence the art, and that the community is reflected. I think we have time for maybe one last question before we open it up to the audience. And so we sort of spoke on this, which is also really difficult to answer, so I apologize, but how do you gauge impact when working with community in your work? And
Yeah, I think it's really in the arts, there's always this need to sort of quantify the impact, and it really eludes us. Is it like the bumps in seats, measure? Is it the number of tickets sold or purchased? Is it the ratio of participants to instructors? It's really easy to develop a particular formula and then try to apply it sort of post haste to all of the events, especially with funding bodies. They have their own formulas, and they like to impose them on you. And I constantly push back at these formulas. I focus on the kinds of interactions that I have with participants during and after an event. I'm not saying that we should only focus on the glowing letters from participants, because you can't always count on receiving those. I'm saying all the participants, I'm not saying survey all the participants, because then you get a mixed bag of like empty forms and doodles and maybe one-line responses. I like to focus on what it was like in the environment. Was there like many aha moments? Did people volunteer to tidy up and stay to chat at the end, or were they rushing out the door? And one of the most trusted means of measuring impact to me is based on how many people can come back to follow-up events. Did they go home and post about it on social media? Maybe did they tell their friends about it? Did they make a point of coming back? And yeah, sometimes it's amazing when you get an email from a participant telling you that they had a great time and here's a few takeaways they had from the event. These kind of contributions are great, but they can't be planned and they can't be forced. If someone gives you their contact info and so that you can let them know when the next event will take place, I think that's a real strong measure of, you know, that you've made an impact sort of in the moment. It shows that they want to be part of the community building effort that is being birthed. So you have to make sure you follow up and you invite them to the next phase or to the to the next event. If someone says, I can't wait to see what you do with all this, and they show you exactly like, look, this is what I did, don't forget. That hopefully means that they'll take pride in how you interpret their ideas in the final project. If during the event people are attentive and participative and they're eating all the food and they're chatting with each other, those are good signs. And if people remember the event sort of weeks and months afterwards, that is also a good sign. If after the event they lingered by the doors and they shared contacts with each other, I think that's community building in action.
Yeah, thank you. I think you hit like almost everything. I definitely agree. I think that there's definitely value in having various forms. With the surveys, it can be tedious, but sometimes valuable if you're trying to get certain questions answered. But it's also really nice to see that organic feedback if people are just resharing things or just like coming out to events continuously. Yeah. Any other points to make from either of you?
I'm pretty impressed, actually. I mean, she made a lot of points. Because I'd say that like measuring impact, I think it's the biggest challenge for kind of, I guess, punctual projects where you leave after the project is done, and you kind of, I guess, lose the story that's being told or lose the engagement because you actually leave, right? But I mean, I guess there can be certain impacts where certain actions and are done afterwards. For instance, like when parks are installed and kind of where like I said earlier, there's less trash, or people, when you come back, people feel more secure and so on. But I'd say that it's one of the toughest things, and it would require for our team to kind of go back and to speak with the community members and see how it is like a couple of months or a year or 2 years or 3 years afterwards. Because I feel that when you need to measure impact, you need to measure it like on the long term and not, you have a small impact on the short term. I think what's the most important impact is maybe on the long term, which is the most difficult thing to measure. But we've actually been at Habitation Jeanne-Mance for 15 years. So it's kind of I guess a study case where we can actually say that, well, we've lived this, and we can, I guess, make the hypothesis of I know that the contexts are different, but I mean that it's when we do researches through that specific project where at Habitation Jeanne-Mance, we can actually, I think, really see the impacts and talk to the same people that were there like 10 years ago that still live there, and they can tell stories how public art changed their lives and made it better. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Chantel.
Yes, amazing points that have been made. I feel like everyone has gone through the list. But yeah, quantitative data and qualitative data are both important to that process. I know for us, we do people counting at events, and if the next time, let's say we have this event called the Animation Project that is focused for seniors. And we have had it for 3 years now. And we see steady growth with every cohort that is run. So that is quantitative data that shows this is receptive to the community. This is something that is doing well engagement-wise, and knowledge that needs to be shared. So quantitative, yes, is beautiful, and it's hard numbers, which board members tend to like. But also those stories, I also work with volunteers. So when I get those emails that are like, thank you so much, I met a friend or two, or it's the next voluntary event and they ask if they can volunteer for a specific person they met last time. I'm like, okay, you left with a friend, like that connectivity is being built, and through you finding connectivity in our community, it's bringing you back, so those moments solidify that we as a team are heading in the right direction, and speak volume,
Yeah, I agree. And I think that also just reminded me that like it can definitely differ for like event-based community engagement versus like seeing the impact of a mural and like the longevity of that and how that can transform someone's experience in a certain space. So yeah, thank you all for all of your contributions. This has been very fruitful conversation and I could keep speaking, but I think we'll open it up to the audience now to ask any questions to any of the speakers. So yeah, thank you so much. Anyone who has any questions, feel free to just pop some in the chat or unmute yourself and ask us directly or ask the speakers directly.
Hi, my name is Templeton Sawyer, and I want to say thank you so much for presenting this amazing panel. I feel that it's really important when it comes down to community engagement, learning different ways of how to connect. It's really important. And what stood out to me is that when you spoke about the last part, impact, I always think about impact because impact is something that we always think about constantly when moving forward. One of my questions is, what do you think about impact when you say impact afterwards? Do you consider recapping sometimes, or do you consider sending like an online poll? And sometimes when thinking about those online polls, what questions are you considering to ask in those online polls? Because sometimes the questions asked is not qualitative or quantitative sometimes, depending on the improvement that you want for the next segment. Because sometimes I've attended some events where they ask for feedback or questions and it's not implemented, or maybe they think that they're implementing it in their unique way, but it's not. Maybe the question wasn't maybe clear or direct as to maybe how the audience may have wanted. So what type of questions do you ask when going into your qualitative and quantitative surveys? Yeah.
Great question, thank you. Adriana, it looked like you were going to answer, not to put you on the spot, but anyone feel free to jump in.
Yeah, it's really tough to think about sort of the long-term impact of your events, and how do you get that information after the fact. One of the things that we've heard from our community is that more people need to know what we're doing. More people need to be coming out to our events. Like, we're not reaching enough. I mean, we think we are, but more people get so excited that they think that everyone in the world needs to know what MAWA is doing. And so one of the things that we've been trying to do a little bit more of is just like tooting our own horn, like just saying, this is the event we did last month, this is what happened, this was the outcome, one of the outcomes. And we're sharing those stories on social media and getting more response to those kinds of posts. So if we say, this is the event that we had on the weekend, here are some images of participation, and usually when we do that, the participants see themselves represented in those posts, and then they engage a little bit more. And there's always the times when we're doing like our looking back at the year of programming, and one of the ways, like, we are constantly taking note of, these are the programs we did, this is the number of facilitators we hired, this is the number of people who came out, and we're constantly getting that information. And yes, seeing the numbers increase is it's a good data point. But with the pandemic, that really took a hit, and we're noticing that people are not coming back. So that's definitely something that we need to ask the community. Why are they not coming back, right? Like it has to be a two-way conversation, because definitely there has been an impact in the past, and there was an impact during the pandemic. People were really flocking to our events, but now that we're trying to have more live in-person events, that's our messaging right now, is come back. Let's bring it back to in-person and in real life. I don't know if I answered the question.
You did. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your question, Templeton. Another question that was asked is, what is the key indicator for one to say that the organization or event was able to engage the community successfully? It's quite a large question as well.
I feel like Adriana made some beautiful points around this when she spoke about kind of at the event, during the event, do you see them huddling in certain areas, trying to kind of exchange contact information, or are they enjoying the food, or are they interacting with vendors, let's say in my case, or not just as we have talked about post-event, also during the event, what type of physical engagement is happening. When the artist is performing or speaking, is the attention being drawn to the stage? Do we see smiles? Is the energy heavy? Is the energy light? Is not always metrics like numerical or quantitative data that can signify that. Sometimes it's just watching the human experience in the space and kind of what that looks and feels like. And as a team, kind of having a post-event review, so I noticed X, Y, and Z at the Mexican food truck, or I noticed X, Y, and Z at the bubble making station, like direct core memory moments of the engagement that spoke to each person can help to understand enjoyment in the space, and also speaks to what needs to improve. Maybe it wasn't enough people standing at the stage when the performer was singing. So do we now have a few volunteers stand close to the stage and encourage engagement? Simple things like that can help elevate the next event. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I'm sorry to but I have to leave. My wife needs help with my newborn. So but thanks again for the invitation. By the way, it was a nice discussion. But it happens, eh? When you have a newborn. I mean,
Congratulations.
thanks. Thanks again.
Joining Charles-Eric and for all of your contributions. So no worries. Yeah, thank you. I think we have another question. What are the challenges and difficulties you have experienced in tapping into your target community?
Sorry, could you repeat that? I missed the last part of the question.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question was, what are the challenges / difficulties that you have experienced when tapping your target community or into your target community, I am assuming?
Yeah, I think there's many challenges. Knowing that we are a very, like I mentioned before, we're an organization that's focused on feminist visual art, and those who know us and have followed us for a long time, they know where we are, they know what we do. But connecting with new communities, newcomers, or people in general, they just might be a little bit like, what do you guys teach how to make art? Like, you know, communicating what our mandate is, that can be a little bit of a challenge. So what we say is here's our newsletter, follow us on social media, get to know what we do, and see how you can participate in sort of the variety of things that we do. And the other part, you know, for myself, challenges that I have is they're kind of around my disability needs and just making sure that I'm going to be able to participate. So when I go to events, I kind of give them a little bit of feedback in terms of how accessible the events have been, or how accessible I found them for me, because, you know, everyone has different needs, and my accessibility needs might be total opposite from what they thought that they needed to take care of. So having, you know, giving that feedback is really important. So I try to bridge those challenges by sort of giving feedback.
Amazing, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to add to that as well, Chantel, to that question?
No, I think Adriana give a full yes.
Amazing. Sorry, I think Selma had a question.
Yeah. Thank you very much, by the way. That was a great presentation. So my question is, sometimes I find young people just people in general, but especially young people, when you're trying to engage them, and for me specifically, young Black people, we can often feel like, okay, but is this really going to do anything? Like, what is this really for? Like, often young Black people can feel like their participation won't actually reach the decision makers. And like, this is maybe like a formality, or just like, why are we even doing this? This isn't actually going to have an impact, which is obviously not true. Every baby step counts. So what can we do to, like, when we're getting the community to engage with us, what can we do to really get them to understand how valuable their engagement is and how it fits into the process, and how when they do engage in public participation, like, it does make a difference?
Yeah, I think there was this compelling need to place people in a hierarchy of how important their work was, or how impactful their work was. I think during the pandemic, certain professions got a little bit more prestige, and some other people were like, yeah, but is what you're doing really, you know, saving the world? And in my perspective, of course, art art did save the world, right? Like what people turned to and what people wanted more of during those times was art. And they're like baby steps, they're little drops in the bucket, but every time you see those glimmers that I was talking about, those moments of aha, like, oh, look at how much, you know, if you're having a public event and it's open to all ages and there's a 6-year-old, you know, intent on making their stitches, like take a picture of that, really capture it, because there are small moments, but they're really meaningful. To me, it is really valuable to get lots of people in and to have an event that's like a real big success. But sometimes it's those moments, those real, like the sun is shining in the right way and the participant is really intent on you know, getting what you're saying or admiring the work. Like those are the moments that I think, yeah, it's really, really meaningful. And collect those, capture those, push back against this qualitative, you know, you must sing for your supper kind of mentality. You just have to capture those moments.
Thank you, Adriana. I do have a bit to add. I know you in particular spoke to Black youth, engaging them, and I can understand how quite difficult it is for them to see like the purposefulness of it. But I think that also comes from decades of being muted and not being taken serious. So we are in shifting times where Black youth voices are being listened to and taken into account, but the trust has to be rebuilt, right? So I think on the end of the non-for-profit sector world, arts world, is being persistent, you know, with showing up and encouraging and inviting and, you know, staying present, like regardless if it's not fully seen yet, when you stay present, eventually, you know, it is, oh, okay, like this is a safe space for me, like my voice is heard here. And I do see programming improve the next time based on some feedback I gave, you know. So in my world, I like to just keep that persistence, you know, continuously extending the invite. And as Adriana mentioned, like capturing moments that do reflect like that beauty and the broader community, you know, and showcasing that through Instagram and social media platforms that show a reflection of yourself in these spaces. So you feel more welcome to come and join and free up and express.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Salma. I just quickly wanted to touch on a question from Claire, and then I'll go to you, Brent. But they just mentioned that they really loved Adriana's comments about assessing impact. And their question was, when resources are limited, priority tends to be given to collecting quantitative results, i.e. attendee numbers, attendee demographics, etc. How can we compellingly argue that connecting with communities, building trust, and having great conversations with them at events are valuable deliverables in and of themselves?
I think you just said it, like, just be assertive about it. Don't make it a question. Just be like, connecting with communities, building trust, and having great conversations at events are valuable outcomes. And here are some examples. You know, we've had our foundation mentorship program for close to 40 years, and we collect quotes and testimonials from past mentees, and you know, often we come across these sort of accidentally, but we notice them and we flag them and we ask permission to use them as quotes for future use. And we when, we might notice them like in an email that somebody was replying about something else, but then they mentioned something really great about their experience. We focus in on it and we say, hey, can we use this as a pull quote? It is important. I'm not saying it's not important to focus on demographics, but it's not the all, and it's not the only reason you're doing the work, right? You're doing the work because you believe in art and its role. And when you see the role, the impact of art in people's lives, like, yeah, capture that and just be assertive about it.
Thank you, Claire. Any other thoughts, Chantel?
I know I did as well speak to boundaries earlier. I know I kind of tiptoed around it, but it's beautiful to, beautiful, to be confident and assertive in your direction and expectations. I know we tend to kind of tiptoe a bit sometimes in non-for-profit and want to spur feelings and things, but it's always a respectful way to communicate boundaries that are set in place, for purpose of programming or trust building or data, all sorts of reasons. But yeah, just it's okay. Like, I guess I'm just trying to give you permission.
Yes. Thank you again, Claire, for that question. Yeah, I agree. I think especially because I think that we've mentioned funding bodies can tend to lean towards the quantitative data. I think you definitely need to sort of push for the qualitative data to be collected as well, and just being assertive is important. And yeah, granting you permission to do that. I'll go to you next, Brent, and I think that's all the time we have for a question. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Just want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. But
hey, thank you so much, Chantel and Adriana, and of course Charles-Eric, who's off being very busy right now as well. Really inspiring work for me and super useful. I'm a slightly older member of this residency cohort, and I am putting together with my mentor. My background is primarily Métis, and grew up on what's Wasanich, or you could call it a Coast Salish community on the West Coast, and that's where I'm coming from now. And my mentor is Cree. And we're thinking hard about how to reach out to my community, the community involved in this project, which is on the Toronto Islands next spring. So I have plenty of time, and I'm working in the next month to put together a community outreach strategy with my mentor. Now, here's my question for you. This is keeping me from looking at my notes, so I'm going to have to wing it. Oh no, I found him. Okay. I really appreciate what you both said about quantitative and qualitative measures. Most artists only have a small portion of their total time and budget to reach out to the groups of people that, we're worried about or being underserved. And my event, I had a sort of a beta workshop. This involves Métis willow weaving sculptures with video storytelling. So I had an event in March, and it was advertised by my host. Now, my host is Artscape, and they have their own priorities, and they really just want to count numbers because they have this really great deal with the city of Toronto where they only pay $1 a year for the space, and then they maintain it. And, they're really good to me. I'm much more interested as an Indigenous person and as someone who grew up in a a highly diverse, multicultural environment, a lot of people of color. I'm more concerned about broadening the audience, but I've got good news. Okay, so I'm concerned about what you might call diversity, but that breaks down. I'm also concerned about class, and I'm concerned about accessibility, especially around mobility. So in March, on a rainy day, I got 30 people to come out for a workshop. 90% were women. A quarter were people of color, including Indigenous people. Everybody was able-bodied. Maybe their kids weren't so much. There were a couple of pretty young kids. And I would say of the people of color, everybody was I didn't see much signs of first generation. So this crowd, based on the accents, sounded like they were pretty much all born in Ontario, or maybe Treaty One, Adriana, but so that's the group that I'm building on, and they're interested in my work. But I can see that working class people, especially working class people of color, were not attracted, especially taking public transit and trying to get out to the Toronto Islands on a rainy day like that. I can't see that happening, especially with kids. And the accessibility wasn't bad. There was a bus, but you couldn't have missed that ferry to. We had worked out that the bus would have come back for anybody who missed that ferry. So you can see the kind of issues I'm dealing with. So now I'm going to have a big an event. It's going to go on for a week in April when the weather's a little warmer. And I think, Adriana, you suggested, that targeting demographics doesn't have to be the total focus on what we're doing. But I feel some responsibilities, and I also kind of have to figure out how much time is available and put together a strategy, including for steps, including for the host organization. And if you have any thoughts on how to balance all these different forces and concerns, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. And again, thanks for a wonderful presentation and so many good ideas that I'll be working with in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, it sounds like you have some really great champions for your projects. And I think one of, a little tidbit that I got from a local advertising pro was to create a kit, just a little, like on your phone or on your computer, a 50 to 100 word description of your project, really succinct, and with all the details, the where, when, how to get there, like really succinct. Try and be really succinct and to the point, and share that with people in an image, and share that as much as you can, and ask others to share it for you, because we can't really count on just our connections. You really have to try and get it moving and get it going out into other people's networks, and do your best. Do your best, and that's all you can do, right? Like, yeah, there are barriers. It's not easy getting out to the island, so you have to kind of build it into people's family planning, so don't just give it to one person and expect them to change their schedule around to make it happen. Just say, hey, why don't you bring the kids? Hey, why don't you come check it out, have a picnic at the island and come check it out. It'll be fun, it'll be free, it'll be this and that, but just make it really succinct.
And we'll have some food.
Exactly. Supper time at 6:30.
Yes.
Thanks.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. We're over time, unfortunately, but this has been so amazing. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, both on the Zoom as well as everyone that tuned in via Facebook Live. Thank you so much, Adriana and Chantel, and also Charles-Eric, of course, for all of your contributions and just sharing all of this knowledge with us. Thank you to the engagement team for all of the tech support on the back end, and for Arts Accessibility Network Manitoba for the ASL interpretation. Thank you, Janine and Tessa. And also want to thank our funders, Canada Council for the Arts, TD Bank Group through the TD Ready Commitment, and Canadian Race Relations Foundation. But yeah, thank you all so much. This has been amazing. I wish we had more time to keep discussing all of this, but I want to be mindful and give everyone their evening or afternoon back wherever you're joining from. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was beautiful meeting you all and speaking, and hopefully we can stay connected.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day or night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.